lot of our work has been around helping organizations decide what's worth building with AI and build it with intent. And on that note, our intent today is simple. We want to help you reframe the question most organizations are asking: where can we use AI? And we think a better question is, how can we operate differently because of AI? It sounds like a small shift, it isn't. And that one reframe changes who is in the strategy room, how workflows get mapped, and how success gets defined. And that's the thread running through our webinar today. So here's what we'll cover in the next 45 minutes. Why the two most? We hope. We just built like 80 slides for this, so hopefully John will be able to speak fast enough. So we're going to talk about the two most common paths organizations take to adopt AI, what the AI workflow sprint is and how it works, how this compares to what's already on the market, two concrete ways to bring this into your organization, and we'll close with Q&A. So if you have questions during John's speech, feel free to start putting your questions in the chat and we'll come back to them at the end. And with that, I'll hand over to John. Let me remove this from...
Okay, and I want to set today's context, where the context is AI and obviously AI transformation, but I want to talk about the real AI transformation, which in our definition means also redesigning the work. So not just buying the licenses, deploying tools, training people to use them, having them use them, but actually changing how workflows run, how decisions get made, how business processes are structured around what AI can do now. So the question we want to answer today is, how do you actually do it? And before we get there, I want to show you how companies approach it today. And usually there's two paths today. Path one is to take something that worked, an individual's AI workflow, a successful pilot, someone who has a clever prompt chain, whatever, and scale it across the team or the department. It's logical, right? Like if it worked once for someone, it's going to, let's make it work for everyone. And then path two is taking the existing workflows that already exist within organizations and retrofit AI into it. Now, same process, same steps, same structure, just an AI tool bolted on somewhere. And also feels logical. It's also because like we've had this process since forever, and it's also very convenient, right? Because we just take something that's existing and we kind of bolt AI on top of it. But both paths hit a wall from different reasons, and that's what I'm going to take you through it. So let's take the first one, where let's assume we've done AI adoption, some training, people are using AI tools, and someone is really great at it, and one person figures it out, and they build a personal AI workflow that's genuinely fast, it's effective, and they've got their prompts dialed in, they know where the AI is reliable, where the AI is not reliable. They've built shortcuts that nobody else knows about. So if you look at them, it looks like, wow, this is the future of work, you know. And then somebody in the leadership sees that and say, okay, let's roll this out to everyone. But the reason it works is also the reason why this won't scale. Because everything about that workflow is tuned to one person's context, their way of thinking about the problem, their standards for what good looks like, their instinct when to trust AI, when to override it. And that's something that's called tacit knowledge. It's stuff that lives into someone's head and it doesn't really survive a handoff to somebody else. So the moment you take that workflow to 50 people, you hit reality. The data isn't clear anymore, file formats are different, then the edge cases that the original person just knew about how to handle, the others don't. And what looked like a scalable solution turns out to be a very personal system that wasn't really designed to be shared with many. And then there is another problem. There is this literacy gap, right? Like you give AI to all of these people, but then they adopt it, they use it differently, they understand it differently. So what's going to happen, some people, when you just hand them off, you put them into a new workflow, right? An AI workflow, let's say. Some people will trust the AI blindly. They don't know enough to recognize when the output is not good. And others will hit one bad output and then they won't trust it and refuse to use the tool again. So you've got a team where everyone's starting from a different place, and then a workflow that was built for someone who already knew all the shortcuts, and that combination doesn't really work. And then finally, there is another reason why scaling individual workflows don't really work. To actually scale an AI workflow, you need what any operational system needs. You need shared ownership, you need agreed standards, a governance model, training that isn't just, hey, watch me do it, and you're going to learn. So one person's workflow, however good, is not that. It's just a starting point. It's not a system that you can use. So when organizations try to scale individual success, these are usually the blockers. The tacit knowledge gap, data and edge cases, different literacy and mindsets across the team, and then the absence of a shared operating model that somebody owns, maintains, and uses to train other people. And these are things that show up pretty much every time when you're trying to do that. So that's path one. So this one hits the wall, then we can go to the second one, select fine, let's try not to copy one person's workflow, let's just take our existing process and bring AI into it. Which brings us to path number two and a complete different set of problems. And to understand what goes into this one, I want to use an analogy. We love analogies here at Design Sprint Academy. You've probably heard of Waymo, the autonomous vehicle project. I'm assuming somebody used it. I don't think we have it in Europe. But this is like one of the most technically sophisticated AI systems in the world, and a genuinely useful frame for what happens when you drop an intelligent system into an environment that it wasn't designed for it. Like in the right conditions, Waymo is extraordinary. You open the app, the car shows up, and then it drives you there without human behind the wheel. And it works because every aspect of the environment has been prepared for it, like mapped in detail, tested, calibrated for a specific city, for those specific roads. And look at where Waymo operates. A few cities in the United States, San Francisco, others as well. But these aren't random. They're places that Waymo has already mapped. Every intersection, every lane, marking every stop sign. So the system only works where the ground has been prepared. That's why you're going to see other dots that those are cities where it's coming next. Well, this is what happens. This is why Waymo is not there, because before they deploy in any city, it maps it. So they're not just using GPS level mapping, but as I was saying, lane position, curb heights, stop signs, pedestrian crossing patterns, everything. And that's what AI uses to navigate. It navigates using this pre-built model of a known environment, and that's what makes it reliable. Now, imagine dropping Waymo into other cities that weren't mapped, like Hanoi, or Naples, or Manila, places where traffic flows by negotiation rather than rules, where lane markings are mere suggestions, where a street market appears on a Tuesday and then Wednesday is gone, where like nothing is predictable, nothing has been mapped. What happens then? Well, it fails, predictably. It stops at the first unmarked intersection and then it waits. It misreads a hand-painted detour. It encounters a road that exists, but it isn't in the model, so it treats it as a wall, and then a human has to take it over. And these are not random failures. They happen because you put a system, right, built for a structured environment into an unstructured one. So the point here is that the car isn't broken, it works just as well, the technology works too, just the city wasn't built for it. And this is exactly what's happening in most AI rollouts right now, because the technology is ready, but the environment isn't, right? Like we have AI tools that are like so good with real capability, we're all using them, but then most of the enterprise workflows, the actual environment where the AI has to operate in, haven't been prepared to receive it. We have messy steps, handoffs are unclear, decisions that are made on instinct, right? So it's like dropping Waymo into Naples. Sorry about people in Naples, if any on the call. And then you're wondering why it keeps stopping. So path 2 is retrofits AI into this sort of an environment, right? Where the roles stay the same, the structure stay the same, the system stays the same. You just add AI somewhere in the middle and you hope it performs. So that's why it doesn't really work. Good, so I hope this is clear, but now let's see how organizations typically build AI workflow, and I think this diagram here is quite relevant. Most organizations approach it through what I would call an IT-led lifecycle, where we have very clear stages running in a sequence. So we have scoping, we have data prep, model development, testing, deployment, monitoring. I think everyone who has been in an IT project has seen this sort of roadmap. Now, it looks thorough, solid, but as you will see, rollouts, the AI rollouts break at some point. So we start doing an AI workflow, the model works, the testing looks good, but then when you're trying to deploy it into the organization can't absorb it. Workflows haven't really been redesigned. People don't understand what the AI is doing or why. And then nobody owns the change management, which is a big thing about any AI rollout, which is so much disregarded. So then you have this new AI workflow sitting there, technically functional, practically unused because no one is using it. And it's not because AI has failed, it's because the organization structurally was not ready for it. And here's the thing, there's like some obstacles that kill most AI rollouts, and they're not really a surprise. They are predictable. We have legacy tech debt, we have broken existing workflows that I was just talking about, there's no clear ownership, we have varying levels of technical readiness. Like, none of these just like show up out of nowhere. They've been sitting there for the whole time. It's just that this approach that I showed, this linear approach, doesn't surface them until it's too late to design around them. So the real question is then, if these obstacles are so predictable, why don't teams see them coming? And then the answer is in how the process and how the work is structured. And that comes down to 3 root causes. The first one is that thinking happens in sequence. Like, IT scopes the problem, IT selects the model, IT tests it, and then at step 5, everyone else shows up, like workflow owners, the legal team, the people who actually do the work, but the decision that affect all of them were made at step 1 without them in the room, influencing them. The second root cause is that even within those stages, decision-making is done in silos, right? The right people aren't together. IT may work with business stakeholders during scoping. Then it's IT mostly doing their thing alone. And then at deployment, when you want to scale it across the organization, suddenly, oh, but we need change management. We need legal to sign off on this. We need L&D to teach people how to use it. We need operations. We need the actual users, all of whom, obviously, all of these people, they have concerns, constraints, and contexts that were never accounted for at the design stage. So this is kind of like what happens and one of the reasons why this doesn't work so well. And then there is another root cause, which I think is the most obvious, but people don't see it, and it's surprising. Nobody really plans for user validation. The people who will actually use this AI, the employees whose workflow it's supposed to improve, right, never get that moment where they can test it, react to it, or push back before it goes live. So you often find out it doesn't work for them during deployment, and then the cost is much higher. So the big question is that we're asking ourselves, what if you could surface all of this before a single line of code was written? What if all of these obstacles that kill most rollouts were visible on day 1 instead of day 90 or 180? And that's the design principle behind the AI workflow sprint, which is the method we want to show you today. So just a very quick introduction. I'll go over it more in detail just a bit later in the webinar, but the AI Workflow Sprint is a 4-day workshop for redesigning how work happens and validating the AI that makes it possible. And it produces something real, a redesigned workflow, a working AI agent MVP, and then a clear decision, to scale, iterate, or stop that particular development. So where it fits, in this life cycle I showed you, the sprint sits right at the beginning in the scoping part. And then the first reason why this sprint works is all expertise is in one room from the start, right? All that expertise that typically shows up too late, workflow owners, legal, people doing the actual work, they're all there day one. Decisions get made together, they're not made sequentially. So we uncover the constraints, right? Constraints that would have killed the rollout on stage 5 are visible in stage 1, and then you can design around them or according to them. The other reason why the sprint works is that it forces the team to actually map the workflow, like really mapped, not assumed, like not from a documentation. And when a cross-functional team maps a workflow together, what they find is almost always a surprise. Steps that nobody knew about, handoffs that only work because one person has memorized them. There's this institutional memory of how things are done, decisions made on instinct. So the sprint makes all of that visible before any AI touches it. And that's important because usually people are just looking at the documentation, say, hey, this is our process, but in real life, that's not the actual process that they're using. And then the third principle why this works is because it forces teams to think about the things that will kill the rollout, the workflow redesign we talked about, integration and scaling, data, user adoption, governance at the very beginning when there's still time to design around them. Not after you've built the model, not after you've spent the budget. That's what it makes it work. And now I would like to walk you through how the 4 days in a workflow sprint actually work. Day 1 is discovery, understanding how work today and where AI can create leverage. Day 2 is design, building the solution blueprint. Day 3 is the build day. And then day 4 is the validation day. That's like a very quick overview. I'm going to show you a bit more detail in a sec. But I want to tell you that the AI workflow sprint, to make it work, like the principle, but now it stands on 3 pillars. And this is important because each one on its own is not enough. This is the system with its 3 parts. And the first of one is people. You need the right people in the room. We call that the AI discovery pod. You need someone whose job is to create clarity and keep the process moving. That would be the AI facilitator. And you need a method that gives all of that structure. Take any of this away and the sprint doesn't work, because a room full of smart people without a method is just a meeting. A method without the right people would just produce the wrong answers. And both of those without a facilitator tend to, drift away or maybe give in to the loudest in the room. So the 3 parts work together. And I will just go through very quickly through each of these 3 pillars. The first one is the AI discovery pod. And this is a cross-functional, and the keyword here is cross-functional team that runs day 1 and 2. 6 to 8 people who together hold everything that this workflow redesign needs. The AI capability, the workflow knowledge, the business context, the legal constraints, and the user perspective. And that's another thing. This team is temporary by design. It's assembled for the sprint around this challenge, and then it's disbanded when done, and everyone goes and does their work. And that's like great because it's very scalable if you work like this. And why is it important having this pod? Like, here's something that happens every single time we're running this workflow sprints. You put 5 people, 6, 8 in the same room and ask them to map the same workflow, and then you get 5 different maps. And the funny thing is, no one is wrong because everyone understands the work from their seat, right? The engineer sees data pipelines codes, legal sees compliance checkpoints. The person doing the job sees all the shortcuts that aren't in any documentation. So none of those maps are wrong, but also none of them are complete. And then that's what the pod does. They make this map complete together. Looking at the pod composition, we have the decider. I would say is one of the most important persons in the room. This could be a product manager, VP of product, whoever owns the decision about what gets built, what success looks like, and what happens afterwards, right? Because after the decider present and engage, the sprint just becomes, let's say, a very well facilitated meeting that then produces a document and then nothing happens. And we don't want that. And then if you don't have a decider, that's the hard line. If you don't have the person who can approve resources and own outcomes, then just don't do it. It could be very, very wasteful. Then we have other people in the pod, the process expert or the workflow owner. So this is the person who actually does the work or is the closest to it. And they're there to represent how the process actually runs, I would say, including all exceptions, workarounds, institutional memory, all those things we talked about. Then we have the design lead. I'm just going to flip through them quite quickly because I'm mindful of time. The design lead brings in the user-centered thinking, right? Their job is to keep everyone anchored to the actual experience of the employee whose workflow is changing, not just the technical architecture of the system. This is very important in AI work where it's so easy to optimize for what the model can do rather than the person using it actually needs. And then you have the AI engineers. They know what AI can really do, not just theoretically, but realistically. And they know what AI could produce in that specific context of the organization, with their data, with their level of maturity, with their tech stack. So they are what you could say a constraint setter. And their job is to make sure that the team is designing something that's buildable, not just dreaming something that's imaginary. Then we have data engineer or people who are close to data. They know what data exists, what quality is like, how fresh it is, what access constraints you have. It's actually one of the most critical roles because more AI rollouts fail because of data problems than actual technological or model problems themselves. So it's very valuable having someone like this. Then we have researcher or customer success. Again, they focus the team on what do we actually know about how this employee works, where they struggle, what they trust. So again, keeping that human-centric approach. What else do we have here? We have someone from the business, right? Business or strategy person who can tie back sprint outcomes to the business. They're the one asking, okay, if this works, what does it actually mean for our bottom line? What gets unblocked? What needs to change upstream or downstream if we change this particular process? So they keep the sprint grounded in the business. They're looking beyond the actual workflow. And then we have, of course, legal and compliance. And what this helps with is your project is not going to be shut down at the end. So they're going to be there from the very beginning, helping shape the right solution that meets compliance and all the constraints that they have. Going back to this, remember where most organizations break is like at the very end. So the pod is built in such a way to prevent this failure. Because when you have the workflow reality, you have data access, you know the limits of the AI, what it can and cannot do, you have compliance boundaries, you have the business ownership, all in the same room from day one, you design something that can actually get through deployment. So you're not going to discover blockers after you've built it. So that was pillar one, the AI pod. Pillar two is the AI facilitator, because bringing the right people in the room is one step, getting them to produce something useful together, a real decision, direction, a design that everyone owns, that doesn't just happen by default. It has to be designed, it has to be facilitator. That's why we call the AI facilitator the clarity builder, because their job is to bridge leadership ambition, which is what we want to do, and the team execution, the how we're going to do this. And they're not necessarily the expert on the workflow, they're not the AI expert, but they're the person who create who creates the conditions for all of that expertise in the room to produce something actionable. That's a very distinct skill, and it's one that most organizations currently do not have. To give you an idea, probably a lot of you are facilitators or are doing, the AI facilitator sits between a workshopper and a consultant. They bring the same energy, workshop energy and tempo, right? Structured activities, time pressure, post-its all over the walls, like what you see in a workshop. But the outputs they help the team produce are strategy consultant grade. Validated use cases, redesigned workflows, build plan, not just ideas on sticky. And that's the combination that it makes it work at the enterprise scale. Inside most organizations, the AI facilitator role is usually picked by someone who already does that, somebody who bridges strategy and execution, roles like innovation managers, transformation leads, agile coaches, UX, service designers. They're just ready to do this. They just don't have yet the method. We get this question like, how technical does an AI facilitator need to be? And the answer is always they need to be fluent, but not a builder. The AI facilitator needs to know what AI can do, understand constraints, be able to have a real conversation with both engineering teams and business teams, but they don't actually need to build the thing. They just need to know enough to run the room well and just know when the conversation gets technical, they can ask the right questions, and they can translate between groups. Actually, I would say it's a downside if they're too much of an expert in AI because they tend to get involved in the solutions. Good. So what do? These AI facilitators, they have a few responsibilities. They identify and define AI use cases. Most organizations actually have lots of ideas on what to do with AI, but not enough clarity on which ones are important, which ones are connected to business priorities. And that's something that an AI facilitator can help with. They use another method for this, which is AI problem framing. We're not covering it in this webinar. Do we have a webinar on AI problem framing? Not yet. Okay. We're going to have one on AI problem framing too. The second one is assembling the right room. And this sounds simple, but it's not so simple. One of the hardest parts, getting the right 6 to 8 people freed up, right, and committed for 4 days requires some organizational pull, and the facilitator has to make the case. But the good news is that one facilitator can run multiple pods on multiple workflows, on multiple use cases. And that's how, even with a relatively small number of facilitators, you can really build AI capability at scale in one organization and tackle very different problems. And the third responsibility is running the workflow sprint itself, setting scope, keeping the conversations focused, surfacing what's not being said, making sure every session ends with owner, actions, and next steps. The facilitator, very important, does not contribute to the content. They're not the expert there. They protect the process that produces the content, but also something that maybe not a lot of people tell, right? Facilitators are not completely detached, and I think this is one of the points that we're trying to make all the time. They're very responsible for the quality of the decisions being made in the room. So they're not there just to give instructions and run people through a method. They're very responsible for the quality of what happens in that room and what gets out. So in the end, the facilitator bridges all of it, because if you think about it, every person in that room is protecting something different. IT doesn't want to commit to something they can't build. Legal doesn't want to come late and fix something after it's done. Product doesn't want to build the wrong thing. The business doesn't want to spend the budget and have nothing to show for it. And then the AI facilitator's job is to hold all of that, surface the tensions, and turn everything into a shared decision. That's the job. And then finally, we get to why you came here for, the method. The third pillar is the method itself. And here, we'd say it is new, but it is not new, because this ties back to the design sprint. And design sprint, as you know, popped up in 2016, and it was built for a very specific problem. How do you take a big complex challenge and get from ambiguity to a confident answer in just 5 days? And that problem, that question, has not gone away. If anything, AI makes it more urgent, because stakes right now are higher than ever. And the same principles that make the design sprint work in 2016, bring the right people together, make the thinking visible, test with real users before you build, are exactly the same principles that make AI workflow redesign work in 2026. So we didn't quite reinvent the wheel. We adapted it for AI, same principles, but maybe deeper thinking and different conversations. So I want to show you the structure of the 4 days. We have 4 phases. Each day has a different phase, different team composition throughout the days, as you will see, and the specific. These are not 4 workshops stitched together. They're a single connected sequence where the output of each day feeds into or serves as input for the next day. So you can't skip one day and have a useful day 2, right? Like you can't start building on day 3 without really going through the design phase from day 2. Now, the sprint doesn't start from 0. That's also very important. It's not magic. I cannot just get 6 to 8 people in a room, run a sprint, and get to a good result. Before day 1, the team needs a validated AI use case, something aligned with a clear business priority, targeting a specific employee and workflow. We're not deciding that in the sprint with a problem that's worth the investment. If that doesn't exist, then you run an AI problem framing workshop first and figure that out, and then you run a workflow sprint. Days 1 and 2 are when the entire discovery pod, all of the 6 to 8 people are working together. You get the full cast in the room for the 2 days. And because the quality of what gets built really depends on having all of these perspectives together during those 2 days. If we're looking at day 1, that has 3 different outputs. We start the day by building a shared proto-persona. This is a real specific picture of the employee whose workflow you're redesigning. A person with context, with pressures, with constraints. We're looking at what their mindset is also and how willing they are to change, because we're asking them to change. And then we map the current workflow, not how it's supposed to work, how it actually works, and we already talked about that. And then the third one is we redesign the workflow, cleaning up the process before adding any AI. So the sequence of the day is we understand the person, we map the reality, and then we reimagine it. And then day 2 is when we move from understanding to designing the solution. Before actually designing the solution, we define what success at scale actually looks like, not just for the workshop, but if this works across the entire organization in the near future. But we also build a risk map. Now we have all of the people in the room. We can surface the things that could kill this, and then we use those risks to design the solution around them. And then everyone brainstorms, there's an ideation and decision-making process, and at the end of it, we end with a storyboard, which is a frame-by-frame blueprint on exactly how AI will interact with the people, how the workflow will work, but also the logic behind it as well. So that's the output of day 2. And then day 3 is a different kind of day because this is the build day. The discovery pod's work is done, and now you need a much smaller focused team to actually build it. You need an AI expert, a designer, and a workflow expert. And their job is to take the storyboard or the output of the first 2 days and turn it into something real enough to test. Although like it's functional, quite functional, it's not necessarily production ready, but it's really enough for an actual employee to sit down with it and tell you whether it changes how they work or not. So on day 3, we're building two things. The AI agent logic, the actual intelligence behind the workflow, and that's something the AI expert is doing. And then also the human interface, what the employee sees, how they interact with AI, all of the handoffs. And during this time, the subject matter experts, they just check every output to make sure that it's not just technically functional, but actually correct, useful, and it makes sense in that specific business workflow. So as you can see, day 3 is just like 3 people. So basically, if you ever think of running this with a team, you need the entire team for just the first 2 days, and then it gets less and less. And day 4 could be just one person, the interviewer, and their job is to find out what's true, how things are working. And again, in these interviews, we're not testing the technology, we're testing the experience, whether people understand what the AI is doing, whether they trust the outputs enough to use it, whether it actually improves the way they work, whether they're going to adopt it or not. And by the end of the day, for the team, the decider, they have evidence, right? And that's going to tell them, well, okay, we can continue building this and rolling this out, or maybe we iterate on it because we have feedback, or we simply just don't do it. So what makes this sprint different, and the principles built into this method? We're always thinking that we're thinking workflows first, features second. So we redesign how work happens before we decide what AI should do. Then right team, right phase. The people in the room change as the sprint progresses because different phases need different expertise. And then finally, it's validation over assumptions because the sprint ends up with evidence. And I think this is one of the most important things that you get out of it. Getting close to the end, I also want to put this in the context of what's happening maybe in your organizations, or what you're seeing when people are doing workflow redesign or trying to roll out AI. And I'm going to show you 3 paths. And I just want to be clear, none of these are wrong. On the contrary, they're just incomplete, I would say, in a specific way. So the 3 paths that I'm going to show you is IT is handling it, or organizations are hiring an automation agency, or they bring in the big consultancy. The sprint doesn't replace any of them, right? It just fills in a gap that all of these 3 approaches share. So let's look at path number 1, which is one of the most common. People drop it on IT. It's like, okay, you need to work on redesigning the workflow. So build the AI. And then IT is looking at the brief, but they see it as a very technical brief. Infrastructure, model, pipeline. What the brief is actually asking for underneath the surface is something that IT wasn't trained or isn't traditionally trained to deliver. User understanding, workflow change, business ROI, change management. They speak infrastructure, technology. The organization wants change. So there is this translation problem, and I think you all know about it, between business, between IT. And I'm not saying it's IT fault. It's not. It's just a structural problem that exists, and things are as they are. Path number 2 is you're hiring external help. You go to an automation agency, and agencies are generally good at building things. Some are specialized in workflows, but it's their business model that creates a problem. The discovery phase doesn't generate revenue for them. Now, the 200K bill does that. So they move quickly through scoping, quickly through validation, and invest real time and budget in the build, which means that the questions that should have been answered before the build, is this the right flow to automate? Will actually anyone use this? What happens what happens to the roles, to the people around it? Usually they're not asking this question. And I know that because I ran an agency for 16 years myself, and my goal was to have some clarity on the brief. I didn't care what it was, but just have clarity and sign off so I can move into the build. And then part 3 is when you're bringing in a consultancy for the strategy, and the thinking is excellent. They'll produce a clear, brilliant AI strategy. They'll prioritize a set of use cases, a compelling set of... The problem is the ownership. Like the people who will actually execute the strategy, they weren't in the room when the strategy was decided, right? So everything looks good on paper, but then when the consultants leave, the organization has a document, but not necessarily the capability. It's like, okay, you should be doing this, but how? So that would be a problem. So this is the gap. He owns the build, that's what they do great at. The agency owns the automation. A consultancy owns the strategy. But what nobody owns is the step in between, the decision making before the build, the workflow redesign, the validation that turns an idea into something that's worth and this is the gap that we feel with the AI workflow sprint. And actually, each of these, the AI workflow sprint could be useful to organizations taking any of these 3 paths. So let's assuming in your organization, AI is spearheaded by IT. Well, for IT, the sprint provides something they almost never get, like lots of clarity before they start coding and building. if you run a sprint with the IT, or if IT has the capability to run sprints with the business, that would be great. You basically give consulting powers to your IT departments. So when the sprint is done, IT has a validated workflow redesign, a storyboard, a story map they can build from, a clear decision. They're not scoping in the dark trying to figure it out. They're not discovering workflow problems halfway through development. So they can build the right thing because the right thing has already been identified and they've been part of it too. For an agency, like if you're hiring an agency, again, the sprint helps build the brief, right? So instead of scoping on the agency's timeline, agency's assumptions, or their process, which might not be ideal, and you know they're trying to get to the build phase, what if the organization, your team, runs a sprint with the agency? And together they build the brief and validate the workflow before actually building it. Also, it would be good if the agency would have facilitation capabilities and they would come to you as an organization, hey, before we're actually automating this workflow, let's just run a workflow sprint to figure out what we need to do, and we're thinking about everything. And then for a big consultancy, right, the sprint provides something their strategy engagements often lack, right, a strategy that the teams will, because the people who will execute the strategy, they will be in the room when it was built, right? Like they already mapped the workflow themselves, they designed the solutions themselves, they tested themselves. So it actually helps make a strategy actionable. That's what the sprint will. Now, as I was saying at the beginning, all of these three paths are right. So they're not wrong in any way. Organizations need IT to build things. They need agencies to automate at scale. They need consultancies to think strategically. What's missing is maybe having this method for making hard decisions before any of that work starts. And this is what the sprint is. Here's something that's very important to us. You don't need to hire a team of external specialists to run it. Like, we're a team of external specialists you could hire, but we can't run all of these sprints in the world. So I think it's very important that companies internalize and build this capability. And the people who can do this work are already inside your organization. Just think about all of the innovation managers, coaches, service designers, business strategists, anyone who already bridges between leadership and teams. So they're ready. What they need is the method, and very importantly, the mandate to do it. And we can help with that. That being said, there is a little bit of a sales pitch in this webinar. There's two ways to engage with us. The first one is to start with a real facilitated sprint. We run it, and then at the end you get a real output before any of this work is done. The second is, again, to scale it yourself through AI Facilitator training, where your teams will learn the methods and then they can run this independently going forward. To make it completely, one sprint is one team, one workflow, 4 days. At the end of it, you get a redesigned workflow, a prototype, MVP agent, and big decisions. And the training is 3 days, your teams, and we cover both AI problem framing, which we didn't talk about, and the AI workflow sprint. And then after the training is not only the knowledge, but you also get the full facilitation kit, everything you need to actually run this independently, playbook, facilitation slides, AI cards. Dana spent tremendous amounts of time doing all of this. This is just like a small sample. So all of these methods that...
Yeah, it can't all fit in one slide.
It's like...
But it's big.
It
has everything in it.
The thing is, we codified and documented every single thing you need to do. Like, these methods are quite... I don't know if I should say this. They're rigid, they're prescribed, they're step by step, but they're also flexible because they can take in a large range of challenges, because what changes is the input. It changes like the challenge, the problem, the map, the people you're helping, but then the steps to actually solve the problem are the same, and also like you need these sort of methods that are very clear because you want to scale them across teams. So that makes it easy to learn. So if that's interesting to you, any of this, start with a call. Like, I'm happy to be in a call with you for 30 minutes, walk you through a real case study, show you how this works in practice, show you the type of outputs, and then you'll make a decision what you want to do. And with that being said, I think that's the content we finished almost on time. Like it's always a surprise with the webinars because we never practiced them before. So this is like the first time I'm talking through all of this material. So it's always a surprise. Hope you enjoyed it. And now I think we have a few minutes for questions. Do we have questions?
We do have some questions, but before that, thank you, John. You spoke a lot.
Okay.
But I also want to thank everyone who showed up, because I know it's a long webinar. Everyone has important things to do and priorities. But I feel that the people that come to those sessions are the ones that are already trying to change how the organizations work. And that's hard work. I just want to acknowledge that. And sometimes it can be very lonely out there. So I want you to know that we are here for you. And whether we work together or not, it doesn't matter. You feel free to reach out with questions or whatever. Now, that being said, I want to go to the questions that we had. And I will start from the back, from the last one, from Jordan. Is there a remote option for this training?
Not yet.
Not yet. It is so new. It is very new. I mean, we are doing the workshops itself, but translating them into trainings, it's a different story. And we just managed to
do the in-person ones.
To do the in-person ones. And moving them online, it's a different animal. And I think so new challenges will be there as discussions are
Plus, a lot of our clients prefer to work in person, whether they fly us in the US or the Middle East. Not so much right now, but yeah.
Okay, let's see one question from Neda. What do you call a workflow and how it differs from the process? And when design sprints are more useful, especially considering cross-functional aspects?
I think workflow and process are quite interchangeable. Like I'm using them. Sometimes workflow, people understand one individual workflow. I'm mostly thinking in teams workflow or department workflow. So something that involves multiple people. So it can be a process. We're going to AI workflow sprints and when we know we need to like apply AI to something. So we have that clarity beforehand. Otherwise, if we're solving a broader challenge or something that doesn't necessarily have to do with AI, even if it's a process change, maybe yes, a design sprint could be more useful. We also use design sprints a lot when we're creating customer-facing experiences. The AI workflow sprint, I think it's very much focused on changing the internal way organizations work and applying it to it. So it has like this scope, let's say.
Another question from Vlad. AI workflows are fluid because AI models, of course, change, and everything changes faster than normal software release. Who manages the revision?
To IT.
IT, obviously.
But that's something, right? Like if you have the right people in the room when you're building this AI workflow, this would be one of the decisions that you make and the red flags that will come up. Like, hey, we're making some decision today based on today's capabilities, but in 3 months from now, maybe things are going to change. Like who has ownership on that one? Who's going to act on it? So those are like part of the discussions you do have in a sprint, but then after you roll it out, it's not necessarily the facilitator observing them, plus they might not have like the technical ability to do so. So I would say it's IT or whoever is owning it.
Okay, and one more question from Vlad. Did you experience pushback from workers whereby some wish to not engage with the process? How do you manage that in advance?
Pushback from workers, never. From workers, no, never. Especially like many of them are part of the process. Sometimes we get pushback from clients, and I think there was a question from how are you pitching this to clients or prospects? In a very similar way on how I pitch it to you, although like I don't have the time to speak for 1 hour. We try to show them the value, use cases, but then the ask that we're making to organization is pretty big. So like you need to have AI facilitators, you need to run workshops, you need to do this in a cadence. A lot of organizations are not ready for this. They want to get to the transformative goal with AI, but maybe not with all of this work. So, but it's changing because I'm seeing people inside organizations that right now I don't have to pitch them. They come to us and it's like we're building this capability. They're calling it AI task forces. They're calling it AI enablement work, or I mean they have all kind of names in enterprise, but they're like, people inside who are now thinking, okay, we need to have more intent about how we build AI. We need to involve more people, and like that's something that we're trying to attract as well. So I don't have to convince someone who's not there yet, because in reality, a lot of companies are still at the adoption phase where they're just rolling out licenses and making people use them. And the way they measure any impact is like how many licenses have we bought, token consumption, how many times people log in, right? So for them, coming up with like what I'm proposing here, it's a big ask. So it takes more convincing, yes. But that's why we keep banging the drum.
And one last question, because we're running out
of
time.
Is it
From Benjamin, is it reasonable to actually validate new workflows, new AI integrated ways of working in just one day?
This is a very good question, Benjamin, but you have to think compared to what, because a lot of time this validation is missing completely. So never happens until like you get it too late. If you do it in 1 day with 5 people in that workflow and you put them in a newly redesigned workflow, you're going to get a lot of insight. And then, of course, you can do more testing depending on what you find out, but you're going to get that initial sense, hey, are we doing the right thing here very early on before like you've invested a lot of time and resources into actually building it.
And many issues surface at the level of trust, of people not trusting the outcomes, and you learn like why and like what other thought process. You learn a lot.
So it's very reasonable.
Yeah. All right. So that's our time. Thank you so much for your questions. You know where to find us. You can always reach out on LinkedIn and speak directly or book a call with John. He loves calls. He loves calls. Now that being said, that's our time. Thanks for being with us. And if you only take one thing from today, take the reframe. Stop asking where you can use AI and start asking how can you operate differently because of AI.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.